Nathan Sterling stood in his corner office on the 45th floor, gazing at the Seattle skyline as the sun painted the buildings in shades of gold and amber. At 34, he had built Sterling Technologies from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. Success had brought him everything money could buy, yet lately, something felt hollow about his achievements. His younger sister Jennifer burst through the door without knocking, her enthusiasm filling the minimalist space. She carried a glossy brochure and wore the determined expression that Nathan had learned meant trouble. He barely glanced up from his laptop, fingers still dancing across the keyboard as he reviewed quarterly projections. Jennifer dropped the brochure onto his desk with dramatic flair. Nathan finally looked up, his dark eyes tired from countless hours of work. The brochure advertised a charity auction for the Pacific Children's Hospital, featuring eligible bachelors for a romantic date experience. He immediately shook his head and returned his attention to the screen. His sister perched on the edge of his desk, blocking his view. She reminded him that he had not gone on a single date since his breakup with Victoria Chen 2 years ago. Victoria now served as his chief financial officer, and their professional relationship remained cordial but distant. Jennifer argued that her brother was turning into a workaholic hermit, missing out on life while building his technology empire. Nathan protested that he had an important product launch in 3 weeks. The new artificial intelligence platform represented years of research and development. He could not afford distractions, especially not some staged romantic encounter with a stranger. Jennifer countered that the auction benefited sick children and would generate positive publicity for his company. She had already promised the organizers his participation. After 30 minutes of persistent arguing, Nathan finally surrendered. He agreed to 1 date, nothing more. Jennifer squealed with delight and promised to handle all the arrangements. She assured him the event would be discreet, with minimal media coverage. Nathan returned to his work, already regretting his decision. The auction took place on a Saturday evening at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Nathan sent his executive assistant to bid on his behalf, unable to face the spectacle himself. He spent the evening in his home office, reviewing code and responding to emails. When his phone buzzed with a message confirming someone had won the date, he barely acknowledged it. 3 days later, Jennifer appeared at his office again. She revealed that Grace Chen, an agricultural entrepreneur from rural Oregon, had won the auction. Nathan stopped typing and stared at his sister in disbelief. His mind immediately conjured images of overalls and muddy boots. Jennifer corrected his assumptions, explaining that Grace ran an innovative, sustainable farming operation and held advanced degrees in agricultural science. Nathan felt skeptical about what they could possibly discuss. Jennifer suggested he might learn something new instead of assuming everyone less wealthy was less interesting. She recommended taking Grace to Canlis, one of Seattle's finest restaurants. Nathan agreed, viewing the evening as a charitable obligation. He needed to fulfill quickly and efficiently. That evening, Nathan received an email with Grace's contact information. He considered having his assistant arrange everything but decided to call her himself. The conversation surprised him. Grace spoke with clarity and confidence, showing neither nervousness nor excessive enthusiasm. She seemed genuinely interested in experiencing Seattle's culinary scene, but did not fawn over his success or wealth. The night before their date, Nathan had dinner with Victoria at their usual upscale bistro. They were discussing quarterly earnings when he mentioned the charity date. Victoria raised an eyebrow and made a cutting remark about a farm girl probably being overwhelmed by fine dining. Nathan found himself defending Grace despite never having met her. Victoria suggested documenting the evening for social media, arguing it would humanize his corporate image. Nathan considered the marketing angle. His public relations team constantly pushed him to seem more relatable and down-to-earth. Perhaps this unexpected pairing could serve multiple purposes. He made a mental note to evaluate opportunities during the dinner. The following evening, Nathan arrived at the Edgewater Hotel where Grace was staying. He pulled up in his Tesla Model S, wearing an expensive Italian suit and designer sunglasses. As he stepped out of the car, he spotted a woman standing near the entrance. She wore simple jeans, a cream-colored blouse, and a leather jacket that looked both practical and stylish. Her long, dark hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, and she carried herself with natural grace. Nathan approached, removing his sunglasses. Grace met his eyes directly, offering a warm smile and extending her hand. Her handshake was firm and confident. She greeted him without pretense, thanking him for taking time from his busy schedule. Nathan found himself momentarily speechless, caught off guard by her presence. As they walked to his car, Grace commented on the beautiful waterfront view. Nathan opened the passenger door for her, noticing she moved with easy confidence rather than the awkwardness he had anticipated. She settled into the leather seat and looked around with interest, but without excessive amazement. When he asked if she had been to Seattle before, Grace explained she visited quarterly for meetings with restaurant clients and agricultural technology companies. Nathan started the engine, his assumptions already crumbling. He had expected someone impressed by his wealth and status. Instead, Grace seemed comfortable in her own skin, treating him as an equal rather than a celebrity. As they drove through downtown Seattle toward the restaurant, Nathan realized this evening might become far more interesting than he had imagined. Grace asked about his company, showing genuine curiosity about his work in artificial intelligence. Nathan found himself explaining his current projects with more enthusiasm than usual. She asked intelligent questions that revealed she understood technology better than most people outside his industry. When he expressed surprise, Grace laughed and reminded him that modern farming relied heavily on technology, from satellite imaging to automated systems. The conversation flowed naturally as they navigated the evening traffic. Nathan discovered that his carefully planned assumptions about this date were completely wrong. Grace was educated, well-traveled, and articulate. More importantly, she seemed entirely unimpressed by his wealth or status. For the first time in years, Nathan felt he was meeting someone who saw him as a person, rather than a bank account or business opportunity. As they approached Canlis, perched on a hill overlooking Lake Union, Nathan glanced at his companion. Grace gazed out at the city lights with appreciation, but without the wide-eyed wonder he had expected. This woman was full of surprises, and the evening had barely begun. The restaurant glowed with soft amber lighting as Nathan and Grace entered through the elegant doorway. The host recognized Nathan immediately and guided them to a private table overlooking the shimmering waters of Lake Union. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing reflections across white tablecloths, and the murmur of quiet conversation filled the sophisticated space. Nathan watched Grace as they settled into their seats, expecting her to show some sign of being overwhelmed by the luxurious surroundings. Instead, she admired the view with genuine appreciation and studied the menu with calm interest. The sommelier approached with the wine list, and Nathan began to suggest a selection when Grace politely interjected, asking about their Oregon wines, and discussing varietals with surprising knowledge. Once they ordered, Nathan leaned back and asked Grace about her background. She explained that she had grown up on her family's farm in the Willamette Valley, surrounded by orchards and fields. After her mother passed away 7 years ago, Grace had returned from graduate school to help her father manage the property. What started as a temporary arrangement became her life's passion. Nathan inquired about her education, and Grace smiled at the familiar question. She had earned her bachelor's degree in agricultural science from Oregon State University, then completed a master's program in sustainable agriculture at UC Davis. She had been working for a large agricultural corporation in California when her mother died. The corporate job paid well, but felt empty compared to the meaningful work she could do on the family farm. The first course arrived, a delicate arrangement of locally sourced vegetables and edible flowers. Grace identified several ingredients and mentioned that her farm grew similar varieties. She explained how she had transformed her family's traditional operation into a certified organic farm specializing in heirloom vegetables and heritage grains. Several high-end restaurants in Portland and Seattle purchased her produce exclusively. Nathan found himself fascinated by her descriptions of crop rotation, soil health, and biodiversity. Grace spoke with passion about preserving traditional farming methods while incorporating modern technology. She described using drone surveys to monitor crop health and soil sensors to optimize irrigation. Her operation was small compared to industrial farms, but incredibly efficient and environmentally sustainable. When Nathan asked why she had bid on the charity auction, Grace laughed and admitted her best friend had convinced her. After years of focusing solely on the farm, her friend insisted she needed to do something spontaneous and fun. The charity supported pediatric cancer research, a cause close to Grace's heart after losing her younger cousin to leukemia. She had not expected to win the bid but decided to embrace the adventure. Nathan shared his own story, describing how he had built Sterling Technologies from nothing. He talked about the long hours, the near bankruptcies, and the eventual breakthrough that made everything successful. Grace listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about his motivation and vision. When she asked if he still enjoyed the work, Nathan paused before answering honestly that he sometimes felt disconnected from the creative passion that had driven him initially. The conversation continued through multiple courses, each dish more impressive than the last. Nathan could not remember the last time he had enjoyed a dinner this much. Grace challenged his perspectives without being confrontational, and her intelligence matched her natural warmth. When dessert arrived, Nathan found himself suggesting they continue talking over coffee at a nearby place he knew. Grace accepted, and they spent another 2 hours at a quiet coffee shop, discussing everything from technology and agriculture to travel and philosophy. When Nathan finally drove her back to her hotel, he felt reluctant to end the evening. Before Grace stepped out of the car, he surprised himself by asking if he could visit her farm in Oregon. Grace turned to him with curiosity in her eyes. She asked why a tech billionaire would want to spend time on a rural farm. Nathan explained that her passion for her work had awakened something in him. He wanted to understand the world she described with such dedication. Grace smiled and agreed, warning him that farm life was nothing like his high-rise office and luxury lifestyle. 2 weeks later, Nathan drove his Tesla down a winding country road in Oregon's Willamette Valley. Tall trees lined both sides of the road, their branches creating a canopy of green overhead. After 90 minutes from Portland, he turned onto a gravel driveway marked by a hand-painted sign reading Chen Family Farm. The property stretched across rolling hills, with neat rows of crops creating patterns of green and gold across the landscape. A 2-story farmhouse painted pale yellow stood at the center, surrounded by several barns and outbuildings. Nathan parked next to an old pickup truck and climbed out, breathing in air that smelled of earth and growing things. Grace emerged from the farmhouse wearing work boots, jeans, and a flannel shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and she looked completely at home in this environment. She greeted Nathan with a warm smile and a glass of fresh lemonade, teasing him about whether his expensive car could handle the rural roads. An older man appeared on the porch, wiping his hands on a cloth. Grace introduced her father, Thomas Chen, a sturdy man in his 60s with weathered hands and kind eyes. Thomas shook Nathan's hand with a grip that spoke of years of physical labor. He studied Nathan with the careful assessment of a father meeting his daughter's suitor. Over lunch in the farmhouse kitchen, Thomas asked direct questions about Nathan's intentions and background. Grace interjected several times, reminding her father that Nathan was just a friend visiting out of curiosity. Nathan found himself respecting Thomas's protective nature and answered honestly about his business and his interest in learning about their operation. The meal consisted of food, grown entirely on the property. Fresh salad, roasted chicken, homemade bread, and vegetables prepared simply but deliciously. Nathan complimented the cooking, and Thomas explained that everything tasted better when you grew it yourself with care and respect for the land. He talked about his late wife and how she had taught Grace to appreciate the connection between people and the earth that sustained them. After lunch, Grace took Nathan on a walking tour of the farm. She showed him the greenhouse where they started seedlings, the fields where different crops grew in careful rotation, and the barn where they stored equipment and processed harvests. Nathan was impressed by the organization and efficiency of the operation. Though small compared to industrial farms, the Chen farm produced remarkable yields through intelligent planning and sustainable practices. They walked through rows of tomatoes heavy with fruit, past beds of leafy greens, and along a fence where chickens pecked at the ground. Grace explained how every element of the farm worked together. The chickens provided fertilizer, cover crops enriched the soil, and companion planting reduced pest problems naturally. It was a complex ecosystem that required constant attention and deep knowledge. Nathan asked about the business side of the operation. Grace acknowledged that margins were tight and competition from large agribusinesses was intense. A corporation called Megagrow Industries had been pressuring them to sell the property for the past year. They wanted to convert the organic farm into industrial soybean production. Thomas refused to consider it, but the financial pressure was increasing as operational costs rose. As they walked, Nathan's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages and calls. He ignored most of them until Victoria's name appeared with an urgent. He apologized to Grace and stepped away to take the call. Victoria demanded to know where he was, reminding him about an important investor meeting scheduled for the next morning. Nathan had completely forgotten about it. Grace noticed his troubled expression when he returned. She suggested he needed to leave if business required his attention. Nathan hesitated, torn between his responsibilities and his desire to stay. He looked across the golden fields bathed in afternoon sunlight, then at Grace standing there in her work clothes with dirt on her hands and contentment in her eyes. For the first time in his career, Nathan made a choice that put personal desire ahead of business obligation. He texted Victoria that he would attend the meeting remotely and asked her to reschedule for the afternoon. Grace raised her eyebrows in surprise, and Nathan simply said that some things were more important than investor meetings. They continued the tour, ending at a small creek that ran through the property. Grace sat on a fallen log and explained that this place had been her favorite spot since childhood. When life felt overwhelming, she came here to think and reconnect with what mattered. Nathan sat beside her, listening to the water flowing over, smooth stones, and feeling a peace he had not experienced in years. As evening approached, Thomas invited Nathan to stay for dinner. Nathan accepted, finding himself genuinely happy to spend more time in this simple, authentic environment. Over a meal of grilled vegetables and fresh cornbread, the three of them talked about farming, technology, and the challenges of preserving traditional ways of life in a rapidly changing world. That night, Nathan stayed in the guest room of the farmhouse. The room was modest but comfortable, with handmade quilts and photographs of the Chen family on the walls. As he lay in bed, Nathan heard sounds he had never noticed before. Crickets, chirping, an owl hooting in the distance, and the gentle rustling of wind through trees. His phone sat silent on the nightstand, and for once, he felt no urge to check it. Nathan woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and golden sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, he forgot where he was, accustomed to waking in his minimalist penthouse apartment with automated blinds and city noise. He checked his phone and found 17 missed messages, most from Victoria demanding updates on various projects. He dressed quickly and found Grace already outside, working in one of the vegetable fields. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and gloves, kneeling between rows of plants. Nathan approached, feeling oddly out of place in his designer casual wear. Grace looked up and smiled, inviting him to help harvest cherry tomatoes for the morning farmer's market. Nathan had never picked vegetables before, but Grace showed him how to identify ripe fruit and handle the plants gently. They worked side by side as the sun climbed higher, and Nathan found unexpected satisfaction in the simple physical task. Grace talked about her plans to expand into value-added products like preserves and sauces, but lack of capital made growth challenging. Thomas appeared with a thermos of coffee and homemade cinnamon rolls. He watched Nathan working in the field with an expression that softened from skepticism to cautious approval. The three of them sat on overturned crates eating breakfast and watching the morning mist lift from the valley. Thomas shared stories about building the farm with his late wife, their struggles and triumphs over 40 years. After breakfast, Grace loaded her truck with crates of produce for the Portland farmers market. Nathan offered to accompany her, curious about this aspect of her business. During the 2-hour drive, they talked about their childhood's dreams and fears. Grace admitted she sometimes worried about whether she had made the right choice leaving corporate agriculture. The farm was her passion, but the financial pressure never ceased. The farmers market bustled with activity when they arrived. Grace set up her booth with practiced efficiency, arranging colorful vegetables and heirloom tomatoes in attractive displays. Nathan watched as customers approached, many greeting Grace by name. She knew their preferences, remembered their families, and made genuine connections with each person. This was not just commerce, but community. Nathan helped throughout the morning, learning to weigh produce and make change. He noticed how Grace's prices were higher than conventional produce, but customers paid willingly because they trusted her methods and appreciated the quality. Several restaurant chefs stopped by to place orders and discuss upcoming harvests. Grace introduced Nathan simply as a friend visiting from Seattle, and he appreciated her discretion. By early afternoon, they had sold most of the produce. As Grace packed up the remaining items, a well-dressed man approached the booth. He introduced himself as Robert Finch, a representative from Megagrow Industries. He had heard Nathan Sterling was visiting the Chen farm and wanted to discuss a business proposition. Finch explained that Megagrow planned a major expansion in the Willamette Valley. They were offering top dollar for properties like the Chen farm. If Nathan invested his influence to convince the family to sell, Megagrow would provide Sterling Technologies with exclusive contracts for agricultural technology implementation across their operations. The deal could be worth millions. Nathan felt Grace stiffen beside him. He looked at Finch coldly and stated clearly that he had no interest in the proposal. The Chen farm was not for sale, and he would not pressure his friends to abandon their legacy for corporate profit. Finch smiled condescendingly and suggested Nathan reconsider, leaving a business card before walking away. Grace remained silent as they loaded the truck. Nathan could sense her disappointment and hurt. During the drive back, she finally spoke, asking if he had known about Megagrow's interest. Nathan assured her he had not, explaining that corporations often approached him with partnership proposals. He routinely declined. Grace nodded but seemed distant, and Nathan worried he had somehow damaged the trust between them. When they returned to the farm, Thomas met them with concerning news. Megagrow had filed a complaint with the county claiming the Chen farm's irrigation system violated new water regulations. The legal battle would be expensive and time-consuming. Thomas looked defeated, wondering aloud if fighting was worth the cost. That evening, Nathan excused himself and spent 2 hours on video calls with his legal team and environmental consultants. He had them research the water regulations and Megagrow's complaint. By dinner, he had answers. The complaint was frivolous, designed to harass small farms into selling. His lawyers could handle it easily, and he insisted on covering all legal costs. Grace protested that she could not accept such generosity. Nathan argued that friends helped each other, and this was not charity but justice. Thomas studied Nathan carefully before nodding his acceptance. He remarked that perhaps city people were not all bad. especially ones willing to get dirt under their fingernails. Over the next 3 weeks, Nathan found himself traveling to Oregon every weekend. He told himself he was simply helping friends through a difficult time, but Victoria saw through his excuses. During a tense meeting in Seattle, she confronted him about his distraction and divided attention. She reminded him that Sterling Technologies needed his focus, especially with the new product launch approaching. Victoria also revealed she had investigated Grace and found nothing suspicious, but she questioned whether a farm girl could truly fit into Nathan's world. Her words struck a nerve because Nathan had been wondering the same thing. His life revolved around technology, innovation, and urban sophistication. Grace's world centered on soil, seasons, and sustainable living. Could two such different paths ever merge? The product launch arrived, and Nathan invited Grace to Seattle for the event. She hesitated, concerned about leaving the farm during harvest season, but Thomas encouraged her to go. He had seen how his daughter smiled when she talked about Nathan and believed she deserved happiness after years of sacrificing her own needs for the farm. Grace arrived in Seattle the day before the launch, and Nathan gave her a tour of Sterling Technologies' headquarters. She was impressed by the innovation and creativity evident throughout the building. Employees worked in collaborative spaces filled with plants and natural light. Grace commented that Nathan had brought elements of nature into his urban environment, perhaps revealing his true values. The product launch took place at a downtown convention center with hundreds of attendees, including investors, journalists, and industry leaders. Nathan presented the new artificial intelligence platform designed to help businesses operate more sustainably and efficiently. During his presentation, he mentioned how spending time on a small organic farm had influenced his thinking about technology's role in supporting rather than replacing human connection and environmental stewardship. Victoria watched from backstage with a tight expression. After the successful presentation, she cornered Nathan and demanded to know if he was losing his edge. She argued that sentimentality had no place in their competitive industry. Nathan responded that perhaps the industry needed more humanity and less ruthless ambition. Their argument escalated until Victoria declared that if Nathan could not remain focused, she would consider taking her expertise to a competitor. Grace witnessed the confrontation from across the room. She approached afterward and told Nathan she was returning to Oregon early. She explained that she did not belong in his world of corporate politics and high-stakes business. More importantly, she refused to be the reason Nathan lost focus on his life's work. Before Nathan could respond, Grace left the event. Nathan stood alone in the crowded convention center, surrounded by people congratulating him on his success. Yet he felt empty. He realized that all his achievements meant nothing without someone genuine to share them with. He had spent years building an empire, but had forgotten to build a life. The next morning, Nathan called an emergency board meeting. He announced his decision to step back from daily operations and appoint Victoria as Chief Executive Officer. He would remain chairman and major shareholder, but would work remotely on strategic initiatives. The board was shocked, but Nathan explained that effective leadership sometimes meant knowing when to delegate and trust capable people. Victoria accepted the promotion with mixed emotions. She had wanted this opportunity for years, but not under these circumstances. Nathan assured her she was ready and that Sterling Technologies would thrive under her leadership. He also told her that business success meant nothing without personal fulfillment, and he hoped she would discover that truth before it was too late. That afternoon, Nathan drove to Oregon with a proposal he had been developing for weeks. He found Grace in the greenhouse, transplanting seedlings. She looked surprised to see him, having expected him to be celebrating his successful launch in Seattle. Nathan sat beside her in the dirt and explained his decision to restructure his role at Sterling Technologies. He then presented his idea. Sterling Technologies would partner with the Chen farm to develop and test sustainable agricultural technologies. The farm would receive investment and technical support while maintaining complete operational independence. Nathan would split his time between Seattle and Oregon, working remotely while learning about sustainable agriculture. If Grace was willing, they could build something meaningful together, combining technology and tradition. Grace listened carefully, her hands still working with the seedlings. She asked if Nathan was certain about such a drastic life change. He admitted he had never been more certain of anything. The past months had shown him that success without purpose was hollow. He wanted to use his resources and knowledge to support sustainable farming and environmental stewardship. More importantly, he wanted to build a life with her. Thomas appeared in the greenhouse doorway, having overheard the conversation. He reminded Grace that her mother had always said the best partner was someone who shared your values but challenged you to grow. He gave his blessing, noting that Nathan had proven himself through actions rather than words. Grace finally looked up from the seedlings with tears in her eyes. She agreed to the partnership, both business and personal. She warned Nathan that farm life would test his patience and adaptability. He would face early mornings, physical labor, and the unpredictability of working with nature. Nathan smiled and said he was ready to get his hands dirty. 6 months later, the Chen farm had transformed while maintaining its essential character. New greenhouses stood alongside traditional fields. Solar panels provided clean energy, and advanced irrigation systems optimized water use. The farm employed 12 people from the local community and supplied 20 restaurants across Oregon and Washington. Nathan converted one of the barns into a comfortable office where he worked remotely, consulting with Sterling Technologies on strategic initiatives while helping Grace develop the farm's technology infrastructure. He had learned to drive a tractor, identify plant diseases, and appreciate the satisfaction of physical work. His expensive suits stayed in Seattle while he embraced flannel shirts and work boots. On a sunny Saturday morning, Nathan and Grace stood in the same field where they had first harvested tomatoes together. A small gathering of family and friends surrounded them as they exchanged vows under an arch decorated with flowers from the farm. Thomas walked Grace down the grassy aisle, his eyes wet with happy tears. Victoria attended the wedding, having made peace with Nathan's choices. She admitted Sterling Technologies was thriving under her leadership, and Nathan's remote strategic guidance remained invaluable. She had also begun dating a marine biologist, discovering that life outside the boardroom had its own rewards. The sun set over the Willamette Valley. Nathan and Grace danced under string lights hung between apple trees. He whispered that he had never imagined his life taking this direction. Grace laughed and reminded him that the best adventures were the ones you never planned. They had proven that love could bridge any divide when two people were willing to embrace change and honor what truly mattered. The farm continued to flourish, becoming a model for sustainable agriculture that combined traditional wisdom with modern innovation. Nathan and Grace built a life rooted in purpose, partnership, and the simple joy of nurturing growth in all its forms. What began as an unlikely blind date had blossomed into a love story that transformed two lives and inspired everyone who witnessed their journey.